Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
And now for something completely different.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Realities of Publishing Comics with me, Paul Gomez. In this issue, I definitely want to talk about lettering, designs, and a little bit about logos. But before we do that, I definitely want to cover a little bit of the basis that we've already mentioned in previous episodes. Those first episodes, we talked about the ideas of comics and how they came about and where are the jumping off points. We talked about the scripting and how those scripts are built to communicate to your artists and your team that you put together. We talked also about editing, and we had great guests that came on, including Chuck Panay, who helped edit and featured a lot of comics and helped tell about what questions to ask whenever approaching an editor. We've also talked about choosing interior artists and choosing cover artists and the difference between them, and also the difference in styles and whatnot. So after that, I really wanted to talk about lettering. Lettering, although it's overseen by a lot of creators as just a mild area that needs to be taken care of, it actually can make and break a comic. One of the things I tell people is whenever I made my comic, me and my kids are a little bit dyslexic. So I really wanted to make sure that I hired an editor that was understanding of that, and that some lettering takes on a little bit more of a characteristic, especially if it's harder for a person to read those words as opposed to being able to see and just decipher them. Whenever you are picking and choosing a letterer, it's not just what letters that they do and just how they put them on the page, but there's structures and rules to it, how they bubble and how they place the words and how the words are placed so they are read. And this is one of the things that I try to tell people. And lettering is definitely an unsung hero in comics. It is one of those things that's going to grab a person's attention and keep them there. Whenever you're talking about the story, the lettering really matters, because if you can't read it or you can't understand it, then how are you going to progress with the storyline? I understand that comics are a visual medium, but they've always said, the visuals are going to be what brings you to a comic, but the story is going to be what keeps that reader pulled to that comic from week or issue to issue. So whenever you're looking for an editor, there's a lot of key factors to make sure that you ask them. Definitely get examples of what they do. One of the things that I did whenever I was looking for an editor was ask them for previous issues of other comics that they had worked on, so I could kind of see their style and their uniqueness, because just about every letterer is different from someone else. So whenever you're picking an editor, please just make sure you understand what you're going into. Look at some of the samples of what they do and just kind of go from there. Just because someone can letter it doesn't mean that they understand the rules and dynamics of it. Some of the simple rules are usually the number of words on a page or the number of bubbles per panel. And this is something that a lot of creators don't understand. If you're going to have a smaller panel, you don't want 100 words on that one bubble. And a letterer can kind of pull them apart and make it flow a little bit different and better. So it's crucial to understand how their work is. It's not just as simple as throwing those words on a page. If you throw 100 words in one bubble, you're going to have this massive bubble that's going to cover up your art. And that definitely takes away not only from that story, also that readability, but the art behind those bubbles as well. So whenever you're talking to your letterer, make sure you know that they can understand how to let that story flow. And it's definitely, like I said, whenever you're writing your script, is your communication between your artist, but it's also your communication to your letterer as well. So another thing that I want to talk about, and we'll touch more on lettering a little bit later, but it's definitely the logo design. The logo design can be just as simple as a logo for a one shot, but it also could be the brand of your comic, or the brand of you as a writer, a creator. Depending on if you're focused on one title, that logo should go with you from title or from issue to issue. So that's going to be their brand with your name as well. And so one of the things you will need to make sure is that logo going to be jumping out there? Is it legible? There's a lot of logos out there that switch letters around to make it unique and make it jump and pop out of the page. But is that logo going to be something that's eye-catching and understandable to read as well? Does it encompass the story that you're writing? Is it really going to be that focal point that you're comfortable with? One of the things that I decided whenever I wrote one of my books, Bushibu Circus Mysteries, was I wanted that logo to be there in a nice arc to kind of pull that eye to it. And also, like I said, it's one of those things that's going to go with it from one issue to another. There are simple changes that you can make, and you can definitely change the logo. But if you do, and someone picks up that next issue, that logo is different, they're going to think this is a different book, a different style, and a different item that they're reading. So you kind of want to make sure that you're marrying that logo to that title. There's several key factors to think of whenever you're talking about logos as well. Not just the legibility of it and the fact that it connects with the story, but the way that it pops off the page. There are some logos that are more graphic, and there are some that are less. And it's a little bit harder for most just to understand the graphic design of it all. Whether you're talking about a simple logo that just has a person's name or the title's name, or something that's a little more intricate that has designs in it as well. These are things that you need to talk about with the person who is creating your logo. There are simple ways to find letterers and people who work with logos. You can go out there on Facebook, Fiverr, and you can ask people at conventions as well, people who have dealt with comic books. And they'll connect you with other artists that have worked on the logo or lettering. But like I say, it's always a key factor to get samples, to make sure you understand where you're going with it. One of the things that I did with my logos is I kind of drew what I had in mind and gave it to my graphic designer and said, hey, what can you do with this? Now, not all logos come out the same way that you envisioned that first time. Sometimes you got to manipulate and move things around to make it eye-catching and a little more popping off that page. Logos are something simple to overlook, but it's also a key to be branding that comic series or that graphic novel, because that's one of those first things that they're going to see. They're going to see that cover art and that logo that's above it. And whenever you're talking about the cover art and logo, you need to make sure you're talking to your cover artist and making sure they're leaving room for that logo. Sometimes the logo can be a little bit bigger or smaller, depending on your graphic artist and how they work with it and where they place it on that page. Those are definitely unique items to talk about with your designers and your artists. Make sure you're communicating every step of the way. So not only do you have a letterer who's could be one person and a designer who's doing your logo could be one person. You could also have a graphic designer that helps design the interior pages, like the back of the cover page. That front page is definitely a key page as well. Usually the inside of the cover page is going to be something that has your logo, has your name, and has your entire art team, and also a few key elements into it as well. So you want to make sure whenever you're talking to your letter logo designer or graphic designer, kind of give them ideas of what you're looking for and what you're striving for. Whenever you're thinking about a logo lettering, you definitely want to marry it together and kind of have that flow that goes throughout that book. You have that logo that jumps out of that page and they see it first of all, but whenever you open up that second page, you want it to kind of flow and just feel systematic with that first page. And it goes to say that you definitely want the letterers to understand each other and where they're jumping in and melding with each other as well. I tell people the most unsung hero in comics are the editors and the letterers, because most people don't put as much thought into it. But there are several rules whenever it comes to lettering. How you're placing the bubbles, how many words you're putting in the bubbles, and where you're placing them as pertain to not covering up the art. And those are key factors in just about every comic. Knowing how many words you're going to have on every panel. And like I said, you don't want 100 words per panel because it will cover up a whole bunch of that art. And that's definitely the last thing that you want to do. Whenever it comes to a designer, they can help you throughout the book, not just the back cover of the inside page, but the inside cover of the back page as well, with those extra pages that you have added on. Sometimes you have an extra page or two if you add them on, if your page count is in between those print pages. And a designer can help you with putting extra things into whether it's a next comic that you're going to be working on after this one's done, or if it's previous comics, that designer can help you put together an ad that not only features you, but can flow with the rest of the comic, so it's not kind of out of place. One of the things that we did in the last comic was make sure that any ad had a black background so it could flow with the previous pages, instead of having a background that was white, where one was a little bit different and a little bit off-putting from the rest of the comic. So, like I say, the letterer, the logo, and the graphic designer are definitely something that you want to keep in mind. I got lucky and I found a great graphic designer who's actually my letterer and logoist. And that gentleman's name is McLean McGuire. He's an amazing at what he does. But whenever you're out there and looking for letterers and people who work with logos, sometimes they can be separate. So you want to make sure that they know what they're doing. How's it going out there? Another thing I really want to talk about and kind of just touch on the subject, and we'll probably approach it at another day, is printing. So I've talked about the number of pages throughout the series, including when we talked about ideas and script writing. But whenever you're talking about printing, you're going to need to know the number of pages and the page counts. I'm not exactly sure on the specific numbers at the moment, but I believe it's 22, 26, and increments of 4 that they print from. And if you end up on an odd number page, you're going to have to add that extra design in there, or add an ad page or something that fills up those filler pages, if you will. So make sure you understand the number of pages your story is, the number of pages you're going to print. So whenever you start that comic, you have that in mind, so you're writing to that point. You're going to have a beginning and an end point, especially whenever you go to a printer and say, this is how many pages I'm looking to print. And like I say, they do in increments of 4, I believe. talking about printers, this is definitely a subject that I will approach later on, but I do want to touch on at the moment. You really want to talk about how they print and what styles and what file formats, and you need to make sure you communicate it through your artists and your designers. There are people who will put this stuff together if you hire them on, project leaders, and kind of like have it put into the proper format for your printers as well. But it's definitely good to reach out to the printer that you're going to go through. And I get the question a lot of what printer to go to, and this is one of the subjects that I really don't have too much knowledge on, but I can tell you this: the best thing to do is go Google printers for comic books. There's plenty of them. Comics Wellspring, Maxim. There's I forget what the other ones are, but there's definitely 6 or 7 big name brands out there that you can go to printers, call them, email them, talk to them. They're glad to talk to you and send you sample pages and whatnot. They can also, like I said, let you know what formats that you're going to be looking into, to making sure that all of this is combined. And once you get to that printing stage, that it can flow that well. So you want to make sure whenever you're starting your project to make sure you understand what printer you're going to go to, because if your interior artists and your cover artists are working with different file formats, it's going to be a little bit harder and daunting to get it all put together to send to that printer. Of course, some printers do, like I said, different things. A few of them will charge differently whenever it comes to variant covers, and some of them will have you with a minimum amount of printing. So again, before you really start the project, you really want to know how many you're going to be printing out. That's kind of a hard thing before you get to Kickstarter, because usually whenever you get to Kickstarter, it kind of tells you how many you need and how many you're going to get extra. I always personally believe in printing at least 20 to 50 extra, because I do take them to conventions, and that's definitely one of my marketing formats, is going into conventions and also bookstores and selling my comics. But whenever you're talking to your printer, if they're going to be charging you for a certain minimum, most of the time they'll give you a price break if you're printing more comics. And this is one of those things that you kind of need to add into your budget whenever you're first starting and thinking about it all, because printing is definitely one of the biggest key factors in budgeting after your artist, depending on how many copies of your comic that you're going to print. And again, like I said, I prefer at least 50 extras just to start off, whether I'm going to go to comic book stores or I'm going to go to a convention. I want to have that extra in my arsenal to kind of sell and show people, so I can get it out there as well. But there's been times where I've printed off like 300 to 500 extra, and it's definitely a cost that you have to add in. It's definitely something that's harder to budget, especially the further you go in. So you want to kind of make sure that you're adding that into that core budget whenever you're first starting looking for those artists, because those are your biggest budgeting factors. And like I said, whenever you're looking for artists, letterers, designers, or just about anyone on this team, I recommend going to Facebook and to Facebook groups. I definitely recommend talking to other people in the industry, because they're going to be able to help and tell you about their experience with some of these other people as well. And they've got people on their teams that are not only working on their book, but are working on other books as well and looking for other projects. So make sure you're asking other people at how to find letterers. You know, like I said, go to Facebook, ask in comic book groups and see if there's letters that you can find there. Most of them are very happy to give you samples and whatnot. Prices really range differently. And as I've talked about the prices of interior artists, I've heard logo prices go from about $40 up to $100, and it really depends on. Yeah, and we got some great letterers in the madness. So it's really one of those things. Make sure you're asking people, because we know plenty of people in there. But those price ranges, they do vary from like $50 to $100, really depending on their experience and what they have. So it's like whenever you're asking them about the price, definitely make sure that you're finding the right style and the right formats that you're looking for. I know that some graphic artists kind of use kit bashing and a little bit more graphics as opposed to drawing, and a little bit more subtle. And depending on the way you want to go is really who you're going to hire. So before you start talking about those costs, ask them for samples. See what projects they've been on, and kind of see what you're looking at that you're going to be possibly be hiring. And the same goes for lettering, graphic designers. Ask them for samples. Letters I've heard go from about $10 a page up to about 20 something a page. I prefer about 17, but again, it really depends on the style, the artist, and the way they're doing it. There's some letterers out there that only have the fonts from basic programs, which is fine if that's what you're looking for. There are some letterers out there that have a lot more different fonts, and there's actually letterers that do it by hand, which is a little bit more of a rarity nowadays. But again, this is something that you need to ask your letterer before you continue on with the process. Make sure that you're not surprised at the end whenever they're doing a project in a way and style that you're not exactly comfortable with. And going back to the topic of printers, like I said, different printing companies charge for different things. I know one company will give you at least 4 variant covers for the same price that they have on just about every one of their printing projects, and start charging for different prices. I know one company that charges you for every variant cover, so it's an added extra cost. And they'll also ask for like a minimum for every variant. I believe the one company that I looked at that charged per variant also charged or asked for a minimum of 50 comics per variant. And of course, that sounds basic, but whenever the costs come up and get added up, depending on how much you're paying per comic, it really adds to it. The cost per comic is definitely a different thing as well. You can go to one that's got lower cost, but again, it really depends on what you're looking for. I haven't looked into the costs in a while, but I believe they range around $250 if you're only getting about 50 comics, 50 covers, or not 50 covers, 50 copies. But then if you get like 100, it'll go down like 10, 20 cents per comic. If you go into like 500 to 1,000, the price drops even dramatically. I believe one comic company dropped the price, I think, to about $150, $160 if you're getting 1,000 comics. But understand, you really don't want to sit on too much inventory if it's not going to sell. And I know most people who jump in the comic industry believe, you're going to sell 1,000 comics easy. And it's just one of those things that it really, if you build up your crowd, if you can hit some cons, if you can go out there and hustle and hit those local comic stores, your numbers of selling comics can be good, but it takes that much effort as well. So make sure whenever you're budgeting how many copies that you're going to buy, that you throw that into the budget, because that's kind of one of those key factors that you're going to need to know whenever that Kickstarter ends, if you decide to go to crowdfunding and whatnot. And again, crowdfunding is going to be another topic that we talk on in another day. So we've talked about many things in these episodes. Like I said, we've talked about the ideas, we've talked about the scripts, We've talked about the interior artists and the cover artists. And here we're talking about lettering, logos, and graphic designs. And that's pretty much going to wrap up that comic, especially going into printing. After that, there's definitely about 100 other topics to cover. How are you going to sell your comic? I mean, are you going to go to conventions? How often is that going to be? How many comics do you expect to sell at each convention? Are you going to go to comic stores? Do you drop your price sale by how much? Are you going to offer bundles? These are a lot of key factors that go into it. How are you going to publish your comic? Are you going to self-publish it? Are you going to go to a crowdfunder like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Zoop, or even Crowdfunder? And there's usually a lot of different types of crowdfunding platforms that kind of pop up here and there. These are definitely topics that I'm going to touch on at a later time, but these are things that you need to keep in mind, especially whenever you're starting to wrap that comic up. How many comps are you giving to your artists? How many comps are you giving to your teammates? You know, how much is the cost? And really the budgeting cost of all these things is one of the main factors. You know, if you're just a writer like me, writer and creator, you're going to have to pay for the interior artist, the cover artist, and usually it's a multiple cover artist. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. You're going to have to pay for your editing, your letterer, your graphic designs, and then after that, you're going to have to pay for your tables at conventions and whatnot. There's also local comic book stores. If you're going to get into them, are you going to do a split with them? Are you going to do it on consignment? There's hundreds of questions that you need to answer whenever you're wrapping up that comic. How are you going to promote it? Whether it's going to be on just digital platforms like Kickstarter, like Facebook, like Twitter or Instagram. How is it that you're going to get out to the masses? Are you going to make yourself a web page? Are you going to make a store? How are you going to sell and get that word out? So like I said, these are definitely plenty of subjects that I wanted to get to, but the main subjects of the day really are the lettering, graphic designs, and the logos. So whenever you're thinking about logos and lettering, make sure you don't just jump over that and forget about it. Make sure you add that into every comic that you make. If you're making different comics, it's going to be a different cost for the different logos. And whenever you're doing letterers, it's going to be a cost per page. And make sure that they know just about how many words per page that you're going to be doing and how many pages that it's going to be, because that's going to be a cost that adds up as well. Let's see. What else do we got? We can go into conventions. We can talk about conventions just a little bit. I'm actually headed into a convention this week, and I really want to talk about the pitfalls and the roadblocks that I've hit in my journey. Whenever I talk about conventions, I think the hardest thing is knowing when to book a table, because just about every convention is different whenever they set their tables out for sale, and you got to kind of keep an eye on it. Whether it's a convention like New York Comic Con, which is a little bit harder to get in because they pick and choose people, or if it's like Fan Expo, and which again, it's a little bit harder to get into because you have to kind of be on that site whenever they open that site up for those table costs. Getting a table is a different and difficult thing as well. I had an artist, a fellow creator, come to me and ask me how I got into this convention that I got into this week. And I kind of told him it was about 2 weeks after the tables got released that I got a vendor's table, which is a little bit more expensive than an Artist Alley's table. Artist Alley's table is probably the cheapest table that you can buy. And usually it ranges from $100 to about $200 or $300. Again, unless you're talking about the bigger conventions like Fan Expo, which might be about $400, or something like New York Comic Con, which is $700 per table. These are prices that you're going to have to kind of keep in mind, because whenever you're getting a table for these conventions, it's going to be months and months until that convention. So, like I was telling this artist, I tried to get an artist alley table at this convention that I was going to, but they were sold out of the artist table within about an hour or two. So I ended up getting a vendor's table, which was about $100, a little bit more extra than what the artist alley table is. And so whenever you're talking about conventions, you've got to kind of keep an eye on the conventions that are going to come out and when they're going to put their tables out for sale. A lot of people ask, how are you going to find the conventions and how are you going to know when they're putting them out for sale? The best advice I can say is just kind of study it, do your research, ask other people. And, one of the things I do is Google conventions for certain areas. Like right now I'm in Texas. So I try to Google conventions that are in Texas this year, and then find out what conventions are coming up the next few months. I go to their website and see if the tables are already available and which ones aren't sold out and which ones are, and then put in for the tables that I feel comfortable with, that I can make the money back, or that I know that I can make maybe a connection or two. So if you're looking for bigger conventions like Fan Expo is a little bit bigger of a convention, and they put out their tables probably a few months ahead of time, but their website's going to be up for about 6 months before it comes up. So their website will be up, and you just kind of constantly go back there and check, every week or every day or whatnot, and see when those convention tables come up. Another thing you can do is you can actually email them and ask them, hey, when are these tables going to come up? How much are the prices going to be? Sometimes they don't know what the prices are going to be, because they'll raise prices from year to year. And depending on, who the guests are going to be, that might be key factors on why the prices are a little bit different. Obviously, in the different areas as well, here in DFW, the prices are a little bit, I want to say, mid-ranged, as opposed to some places. If you're looking at littler towns, they'll be a little bit lower. And, whenever you're talking about certain conventions, if you have like a smaller town and they're doing a convention at a rec center or whatnot, sometimes they might be free and they might give the tables away just to have you there. So these are things to definitely ask whenever you're going and looking for conventions. It's never been an issue for me to email them and ask them a question or two. I advise you not to email them day after day. I've gotten into conversations and actually met some of the showrunners and talked to some of these people, and it's been because I did email them with a question or two, and usually they would kind of open up that conversation. I did have a convention out of state, and it was a bigger convention, and they moved my table around, and whenever they did, they contacted me and actually gave me a call. And I remember sitting there talking to one of the people who were running the show for a good 30 minutes on the phone. And he came up to me as soon as the convention started, and we talked for another hour there. So it's always a good thing to reach out and talk to them. Let them know what your situation is, what's going on with you, because you could always ask what's going on with the convention as well. That's definitely not a bad thing to do. But when it does come to conventions, like I said, sometimes you don't know when those conventions are coming up. So you have to do your research. Ask other people who go to conventions, what are the best conventions to go to? What are those certain ones in this area? What months and what dates they usually come in? And some people will give you actually the time frame that they start posting and whatnot. I like to also join Facebook groups of the conventions. Most of them will kind of stay in those Facebook groups year after year. So it'll pop up when that convention's just about to come up. Currently, I'm going to be going back to the first convention I ever went to, which was Abilene, in just about a few months. And I know I was on their Facebook site, and I know I talked to their showrunner at least once or twice. And so whenever that convention came up, they sent me an email letting me know what was going on. But I didn't know it that first year. It was really one of those things that I had to kind of seek out and find, and kind of like look for a convention in the Texas area. So I was glad I did, because that was definitely one of my biggest conventions. And I'm happy they emailed me, because I definitely want to go back and hang out and see some of those great people. One of the things I personally like to do at conventions is to find the people who are running the conventions. I like to give them a gift, and this is just me. Usually I like to give them a gift of a signed comic or one of the projects that I'm doing at the time. Let them know that I appreciate them for having me there. Go out of your way to meet these people, because they're obviously they're making money from it and doing things to bring people and promote, but this takes a lot of time and effort as well, not only to promote you, but promoting the show that you're going to be at. And it's just one of those things that I've always said, if there ain't going to be people out there to promote you, how are you going to get seen? So make sure you give thanks to all those promoters out there, including the people who are running the conventions. They're working on their websites. They're working on their Facebook groups. They're trying to make it the best convention that they can, and to bring in as many customers, but also promote you, because you're one of their attractions. So talk to them, let them know what's going on. Ask them for tables if they have all their tables sold out. Just about all the time they'll have waiting lists, and this isn't exactly a no. I mean, this isn't them saying no, that you can't be in the show. This is just they're currently at capacity. Let's see, if anyone's going to drop out of the show, if there's going to be a spot that opens up. And I've had one show that actually opened up for me while I was on the waiting list, and I appreciated talking to them and letting them know, hey, I was a new artist. I'm just trying to get my foot in the door and trying to get a table so I can get known. And whenever they did have a spot, they kind of gave me a call back and said, hey, we got a spot for you if you're wanting to get that. And these are kind of things that I didn't know about. I didn't know to email them. I didn't know that I could call some of them. I didn't know that you had to kind of keep your eye out there, or how many months in advance that you had to book a table and whatnot. Conventions aren't exactly the easiest thing to do. Especially if you're going out of town, you're going to have to book, your room for the night. You're going to have to make sure you got enough money for food. One of the things I try to tell everybody is make sure you have change. Make sure you have cash on hand, because at most conventions, cash is king. And you'll have a lot of customers that will come and only want to pay with cash. So you'll have to have the change right there waiting for them. Hotels, cash, product, your setup. Make sure you're going to have gas money to get back and forth. This is definitely travel expenses. These are things that you're going to have to budget whenever you do go into conventions. And it's kind of a little bit harder to do. You don't know how well you're going to do at a convention or not. It's kind of a hit and miss kind of thing. I always go in there with the attitude that I'm going to sell and I'm going to sell as much as I can. But first and foremost, to me, it's that interaction with the people, being able to talk to them and communicate and show them what you got. I make sure that I got a product that's worth every penny, and I definitely want to show that to every customer that I can. Getting out there with a good attitude, a good smile, and a great pitch is definitely one of the the best and key things I could tell you whenever it comes to a convention. I always say acknowledge the showrunners and the people who are hosting the convention. Depending on those people who are hosting the convention, it really depends on how the shows go. I've been to conventions where it was a small 6-foot table in an enclosed space where it was one person to another, and you really didn't have much back room, so it was just you at a table. And then I've had places where it was you and an 8-foot table and like an extra foot on each side and about 6 or 7 feet behind you, and you have all this space around you. But I've also been at conventions where they had plenty of volunteers that they went around and offered them free waters and made sure that if you needed a break, they had one of their volunteers to help you out with your table and watch it just for a minute or two while you took a step away. And I've had, conventions where you didn't get anything or didn't see any volunteers or anyone that was affiliated with the conventions. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of understand and expect whenever you're going into it. Always plan for I don't want to say the worst, but always plan that it's just going to be you or whoever you take with you and whatever you have there. So make sure you bring yourself a few extra snacks, a few extra drinks, so you don't have to get away from that table as much. Of course, like I say, you definitely want to make sure you have your inventory. Yeah. If I have a convention here in DFW, I'm not really too afraid of it because I can call somebody up, hey, go to my house, pick up, this extra box of comics or whatnot. But if I'm going out to a city that's about 6-7 hours away, or even out of states to New Orleans, like I've done once before, it's one of those things that you have to say, I have no clue how much I'm going to sell. I need to make sure that I take enough. And if you don't, you just got to be happy with the amount that you're taking with you. It's really a hard thing to price the amount of copies that you're going to take with you and the amount of extra stuff, and then loading all that stuff up with your whole setup, your cover for your tables and your backdrops of whatever you're going to take. I personally take a candy bowl and set it on my table for my guests, and I take a display kind of thing, a rotating display that sets me apart a little bit differently than most people there. You definitely want to have a rack or some kind of stand for your comics if that's what you have, but something that just kind of separates you from the rest. I also usually have a demo comic or two that I put on the table so I could just flip through. Excuse me. So I can flip through and show people. And I want this one comic to be my demo. Excuse me. Because this is going to be handled by me so often that it's going to get worn and torn. And you don't want to change out that demo that often. I like for people to feel the thickness and quality of my pages and see that bright and shininess of the colors jump off the page. And so I try to have a demo of each comic. One of the other things I try to do is bring extras with me. If you got prints, like I said, I'm not an artist. I'm lucky that one of my best friends is an artist, and he has donated a few of his prints to my table, and he's actually one of my cover artists. So I think about 5 of his prints, and one of my cover pages is a print, and I show them. I have those on a book on the table for extras. I also have a few cards and a few mini prints. And one of the things I do with one of my cards is actually I have a foil card that I just kind of flip around in my hand so people kind of notice whenever they're walking by the shininess of that foil. I also have foil covers, which I display, and they're different price points than some of my other comics. But it's one of those things that gives you another price point to sell a little bit higher and a little bit nicer to do. This also goes back to some of the printing costs. Whenever you are printing, you should definitely ask your printer if they do specialty covers like foil covers or metal covers, kind of this stuff, and how much that cost is going to be. That cost of the printing definitely goes into mind whenever it goes into the cost of the sales of the comic, and kind of where you go to the customers, to make that profit. I mean, I personally don't believe in stretching the profit as much as I can. I try to keep one at an affordable rate, and then my variant covers at a little bit different rate, and then my foils at a higher rate. But again, the foil covers cost a little bit more to print. And that really, the cost of the printing is going to depend on your printer and who you go to. So make sure you know those costs whenever you're going into it. It's a good idea to keep this in mind whenever you're starting out also, because if you're going to want to do specialty covers, you're going to try to figure out how to get it done and what printers to get it done. I believe certain printers don't do foils, and I don't know how many do metal covers. I don't think there's that many of those. So make sure you understand where you're going into. Whenever it comes to conventions, like I say, have product, not just your comic. There's other ways to make a pretty penny on this. You can have t-shirts. You can have one of the things that I heard just the other day that I'm looking into is shot glasses. Most of my comics are for teenagers and adults, and if I'm aiming at adults, I figure shot glasses are just right around that age group. But again, if you're going for the younger market, I know plenty of people that do like stuffed animals or figurines. These are kind of things that you can look into and kind of budget as well. But I mean, the main thing at this point, like I said, once you got all that stuff figured out, once you got the cost of the comic, once you got the cost of everything up until the point of lettering and printing, before you get into the conventions, these are the main prices that you get into before you go into that marketing stage. And this is what you really need to know. Understand that sometimes you can break it up into smaller increments. I know whenever I deal with my interior artists, I pay them per every 5 pages or so, I believe. And whenever it comes to my letterer, I usually pay him at the end. My editor, I usually pay at the beginning because I'm going back and forth to him throughout the situation or throughout the product, making sure that the artists are leaving enough room for the words and the bubbles and that they are right to be on those pages. Sometimes, and most of the time, the editor is going to look back at those pages and make sure and double check and make sure that they are right for you. So these are one of the reasons that I feel that you pay your editors first. I try to get the cover artist paid for and done as soon as possible, because if you are hitting a Kickstarter, you really want those cover pages to sell. And I try to get my interior artists to at least a 75% done until I hit a crowdfunding kind of campaign. So there's not too much left to go. How long it takes for those interior artists to get done is really depending on them and their skill set, and usually that adds to the cost. So you really want to make sure you know that timeline before you go anywhere near a Kickstarter. The Kickstarters, I tell people, is more whenever you're closer to getting to the end of creating that comic as opposed to the beginning. I know a lot of people that start at the beginning and try to get that Kickstarter so that funds can help funnel into the comic. But the thing about that is, if you get those funds and start paying somebody and then they don't finish the job, how are you going to get that product to the customer? And so I tell people, make sure you're at least 2/3 of the way done, 3/4 of the way done, close to the end mark, so you can start to get that product to that end point. Here with my last campaign, I'm getting my my comic sent to me now, which is about a month or two after my Kickstarter. I did have one or two delays that hit me right after that Kickstarter, but the point was, by the time I started that Kickstarter, my interior pages were 75% done. So I had to stop them because they ended up making me a cover page, and I had to stop one or two other things. But once those problems got fixed, everything was back on track, and we're still on that timeline that I gave my customers, which was just here in October, ending right there at the beginning of September, I believe. So it's always a good just kind of rule of thumb to kind of keep those Kickstarters at the end. Make sure that project is well on its way and just about finished before you get there. I know it's harder to fund a comic that way, but thing about it is, if you're not going to be able to fund the comic that way, then in reality, are you going to be able to afford to go out to the conventions and sell it? Are you going to be able to afford to go out there and hustle to get it to comic stores? Are you going to be able to afford to buy these products that are going to help you make a few extra dollars at conventions and whatnot? I mean, are you going to even be able to afford the gas and the travel expenses? So make sure you understand your budget is probably the one thing that you need to keep an eye on the most, and know where you are and where your end point is and where everything's going to fall into place. Well, here we are, just about the end of the show. I really don't have much after that. We talked a little bit about lettering and graphic design and logos and conventions. And we're going to talk more about them in future episodes.
Dude, now I sat here and I quietly listened to everything you were saying. Because some of it I have opinions on.
Well, let's hear them.
But you see, the thing is I'm not one of you guys.
Well, I mean, I still don't mind. Yeah,
my opinions come from the fan side of it.
Well, I was talking to an artist the other day, and he was like saying, "Oh, if you're not an artist, you shouldn't have an opinion on art." And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
No, look, what I like,
right?
What I like. Okay, yeah, I can form an opinion around what I like. Does that mean you're gonna like it or like it to the same degree as I am? Of course not. That's why the term art is subjective comes into all this, and that's why I don't review books, especially like the art in books. Who the hell am I to say, oh, your art structure sucks, or your writing, your story structure is weird? Who am I to say that? Okay, now I might read a book and I might read something that takes me out of the story. Okay, and to me, that's an editor moment.
Right.
Okay, that's how it just goes through my mind. Oops, editor moment. Go back in, keep reading, right? And you get those. Okay.
I also this week, it was kind of ironic. There was a creator out there that posted on Facebook saying, if you aren't in the industry, then you shouldn't be giving your opinions or something. You're right. I mean, that's definitely the postage. Whenever it does go up, it kind of like gets you on that backside. I know usually I put postage about $8 or so, and that's because I put those Geminis and I get that flat rate.
Another thing that I have an opinion about. There's a reason RJ handles fulfillment for people's campaigns.
Yeah, and RJ's great.
He brings shipping down for the fans. He makes it less of a hassle for you guys. Okay, and it doesn't cost you anything really, because the cost is part of the shipping cost that you're already charging people.
Right.
So it's kind of a no-brainer to let somebody else who does a great job, by the way. Everything that I've gotten from Critical Blast
RJ's
has been pristine. No
matter
what.
I love those bags that he puts them in too.
I mean, not only that, your Gemini comes in these beautiful. Man, I don't have. Oh yeah, I do. I have the one that Tropical Magics came in yesterday.
Yeah.
He puts the Gemini inside the plastic bag, no water damage.
Right.
Look, he does you a great job, a great service. Now, there's different tiers to his service. The white
Right.
bags cost a little more. If you want your logo on them, it costs a little more. But like
Yeah.
I said, these are the things. Those are the marketing, packaging, and image and branding things.
Yeah.
That you might consider throwing an extra couple bucks this way, because branding and imaging nowadays, you want people to recognize that logo.
Yeah. Oh,
You
definitely.
want them to recognize it every time they see it, not just on a comic book or what. You want them to, T-shirt, yeah, I know that comic. You want people. Branding is huge.
Yeah.
It's a visual medium, yo.
Yeah.
People
No, I
are
agree.
looking at it. You see what
I
I'm
agree.
saying?
Yeah.
By the way, Tropical Magics, great book. I already sent my Pops mini review off to Mark. Great story, fun story. If you guys didn't get it, check it out. Only had one very small thing that took me out the story, but not, it wasn't a flow issue or anything. That it was like there was a word missing.
Yeah. Right.
A little 2-letter word, but it made a whole, it was like it was enough for me to go, oh, all right. You know what I mean? It's like, and those are the things I tell people about. If it takes me out of the story,
Yeah.
if it makes me pause and brings me back to the real world, even for an instant, it's an editor moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So editors are huge, man. Even if it's just something
yeah.
as simple as a missing word.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times has somebody sent you a text and missed a word, but you read it just like the word was there because you know what they're trying to say.
Right.
It was like that. You knew what they were saying. It wasn't something that screwed up the sentence. I mean, it was just oops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, because you could easily miss that.
Yeah.
I have this totally anal freaking mind. Every mistake, every spelling mistake, every comma in the wrong place, it jumps out at me off the page like it's bold, italicized, in a completely different font.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like it just goes bam, hits you in the face. A missing word doesn't do that to me because there's no font to associate it with. It was just like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
and I just went back to reading again. It's like, oh, something missing in that sentence. Okay, I get it. I know where they're going. Okay, and you read on, right?
And sometimes, those editing mistakes, like I said, I'm dyslexic, so it kind of like makes me re-pause and think things. And that's definitely why I say, editors are my best friend.
Editors and proofreaders definitely are important to your book.
Yeah.
If that's the only little thing that took me out of that whole book, though, that's pretty freaking good.
Right.
Okay, because everything else is great. It's a fun story. I like it. I like where it's going. Can't wait for book 2. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. I had a publisher just look at Bushibu recently, the first issue, and they're like, "There's an editing mistake," and I was like, "How many?" And they're like, "1." And they showed me. And I was like, "Man, that the funny thing." Yeah, but it's like, it's been out for so long. I've reread the book and I
think I pointed it out to you, didn't I? I think I did.
I think you did.
Yeah,
I think you did. That was again a while back, though. I mean, that was
most of that
months
stuff.
back.
Like I said, for me, it jumps off the page, and I'm not trying to be, Mr. Reviewer or any of that. I never have wanted to take on that role. You know that, but I will get with you in private and go, "Hey, yo, this is what I saw." This is what
I appreciate that. I mean, because like I said, I'm not that great at editing. I'm dyslexic, so it's like rereading stuff kind of hurts a little bit, and it's like the fact that it only had like one edit in there that was really noticeable. I'd rather it not have any, but we'll fix it and change it on the next print run or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that we will. Now, remember, don't be talking to too many people. Don't sign nothing you can't get out.
Not signing nothing. But yeah, man, I got this big convention coming up, and I'm getting ready. And like I said, the issue 2 is supposed to be coming in the mail too. Yeah. Sam and Laurie.
Laurie's gonna be there. It's like half our crew is gonna be down there hanging out at Cowtown, man.
Yeah.
So, and the other half is over there at the Dallas the Dallas show this last weekend, right?
Yeah, Dallas Expo.
Gabriel and Andrew and everybody was at that show. It's like,
man,
people are everywhere.
Telling you.
Yeah, watch out. We're definitely coming down to Texas in the road show. We're definitely
man. To Texas. Hey, I'm ready to go upstate too. I'm ready to go visit you up there. I'll pack my bags, bring Bushy Boo, and we'll hit the road.
We got you. Yeah. You know what's up. Paul, as always, great show.
Thank you, Pops. Thank you for having me.
I like the way you do it. You're very thorough. You have notes. You flow from one topic to the next in your overall topic. You do a good job. I hope you keep doing the show on the network, bro.
I plan on it, and I hope I help other people out.
All right. For all of you who is watching, we appreciate you. Make sure you go like, subscribe to all the different places that we're broadcasting this. It's on Twitch, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's in groups, it's everywhere. Go check it all out, man. Stay tuned with what we're doing. We got we got daily programming now. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. 21 shows now, Paul.
21 shows and growing.
21 shows. We added one this morning. I don't know if you saw Drawing with Demon, but he was here this morning. Dan Monroe did a show, and he's going to be back every week. So a lot of fun, guys. Just keep paying attention because we're going to keep getting bigger and doing our thing. Yeah. Peace, everybody. We're kind of out of here.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month, we add more.